The ground shook. Engines roared through the thick fog. And somewhere across the forest, steel monsters were creeping closer. Early on the morning of May 10th, 2025, in eastern Ukraine, columns of Russian tanks, armored vehicles, and elite special forces stormed into the village of Dresba in a massive, coordinated assault, aiming to crush the Ukrainian defensive line with a single decisive blow. Their orders were absolutely clear. Their numbers were overwhelming. But what they didn't expect was that their every move was being tracked, and Ukraine now had sophisticated weapons supplied by the US. "17 kilometers from the front line, hidden in the silence, an M109 Paladin self-propelled gun suddenly opened fire. Supported by a reconnaissance drone hovering overhead and a real-time battlefield data stream, the gun not only reacted to, but also preempted every enemy move. It struck with such precision that the enemy had no time to react. What followed was more than a simple battle. It was a living testament to the cold, lethal nature of modern warfare. How could 3 soldiers and a cannon stop an attack in less than an hour? Stay tuned. The answer is a wake-up call. Early on the morning of May 10th, a thick fog blanketed the wheat fields of eastern Ukraine. The village of Dresba, once a sleepy small checkpoint, was jolted awake as the ground began to shake violently. The roar of Russian tank engines filled the air. The first was the T-72s, the steel beasts roaring forward. Following behind were the BMP infantry fighting vehicles and storm assault teams moving in a dispersed formation. This was no probing attack. This was a full-scale attack. Russia's plan was clear: use overwhelming firepower, lightning speed, and heavy armor to tear apart the defense line before Ukraine could react. 12.7mm machine guns and 30mm automatic cannons from BMPs rained bullets down on the trenches. The Ukrainian 93rd Mechanized Brigade was the first to feel this thunderbolt. In the muddy trenches, the Ukrainian soldiers had only old PKMs and RPGs at their disposal. The disparity in firepower was obvious. They were crushed. Artillery and armor-piercing shells tore through the ground like plowshares through dry soil. Without artillery support, the defenses were in danger of being flattened. But modern warfare is no longer determined by numbers. It is by speed, data, and chilling precision. Ukraine has something Russia didn't expect: the American M109A6 Paladin self-propelled gun. It doesn't need to be on the front line. Hidden 17 kilometers behind the combat zone, Paladin can still hit targets with incredible accuracy thanks to its 155mm gun and automatic fire control system. While the old Soviet guns took up to 5 minutes to calculate, the Paladin does it in under 30 seconds. And when it finishes firing, it immediately moves. Shoot and run, a tactic that helps avoid counter-battery. In the trenches, the Ukrainian soldiers had no idea exactly what was protecting them. They only heard distant explosions, and then Russian tanks started to burn. As the Russian formation advanced confidently, seemingly on the verge of breaking through the defense line, the Paladin silently opened fire from deep in the rear. This gun is more than just a weapon. It is a symbol of the artillery revolution of the 21st century. Everything worked like a precise time machine. In less than a minute, all the target data from the forward command post was transmitted to the digital control system. Paladin handles every factor, from GPS coordinates, altitude, weather, propellant temperature to Earth's rotational offset, all calculated automatically. Then each shell shot into the sky. Not fired on impulse, but aimed directly at the precise movement of the Russian BMPs that had just crossed the southern edge of the forest. One exploded on the spot. Another was violently shaken, and immediately the entire Russian formation began to fall into chaos. The superiority is not only in firepower, but in the ability to calculate to win. The Paladin can fire 4 rounds per minute and move immediately after firing. Russian counter-battery radar systems need 60 to 90 seconds to determine the firing location, but the Paladin disappears from its original position before it can respond. And that's just the beginning. The Phoenix drone, hovering 750 meters above the ground, is the invisible eye in the sky. It doesn't just shoot video, it also processes battlefield data in real time. The AI built into the device recognizes each vehicle, assesses the threat level, and transmits data to the command center every 1.7 seconds. Thanks to that, the cycle from detection to firing is completed in less than 45 seconds. Phoenix does not just observe, it understands. A T-72 preparing to fire into a Ukrainian trench is immediately identified. The AI immediately flagged the priority target. The ammunition was loaded. The T-72 exploded before the trigger could be pulled. The Phoenix also helped prevent the risk of friendly fire, especially when Ukrainian soldiers were approaching the Russian tanks. Thanks to its ultra-precise thermal imaging capabilities, not a single bullet from the Paladin strayed into friendly formations. The duo of Paladin and Phoenix have elevated artillery from a passive role to an active one in control. Russia is not stopping. The second wave of attack is taking shape. Infantry is starting to spread out across the wheat fields. Tanks are regrouping to attack. Ukraine knows a temporary stop is not enough. It needs a stunning blow. And they deployed a tactic that many artillery units around the world have only practiced in simulation, MRSI, firing multiple rounds in quick succession, but all hitting the same target within just 2 seconds. Each bullet had a different angle, a different trajectory, but they all came down at the same time. 6 bullets, 6 directions, and then the fire rained down like a flood. 2 BMPs exploded. A T-72 lost its tracks. The formation disintegrated, but the biggest impact, not physical, it was psychological. The Russian soldiers did not understand what was happening. They panicked. They retreated without orders. In previous wars, it took an entire artillery battalion to create such an effect. But in Dresba, a single smart gun did it in less than a minute. The battle was not over yet. The Russian infantry began to spread out, dig in, and prepare for a close-quarters assault. But Paladin did not give them that chance. Now, the threat was no longer tanks. It was infantry weaving through the fields. And the next weapon deployed was the DPICM, a cluster munition against people. Each one contained 88 sub-munitions, as small as baseballs, that exploded independently when they hit the ground. This was not indiscriminate fire, it was programmed damage. The explosion altitude was set at 50 meters for maximum damage. And then each shell exploded in the sky like steel flowers. The ground shook, heat spots flashed across the screen. Russian soldiers were hit by shrapnel. There was no warning, no sirens, just silence, and then instant death. The Paladin alone was 10 times more effective than traditional explosives. "51 minutes, 22 explosive rounds, 8 super-precise Excalibur rounds, 4 D-Pick'em anti-personnel rounds, 1 gun, history, but no, Paladin did not win by himself. Every shot fired had a human imprint behind it. Inside the sealed steel compartment, 3 Ukrainian soldiers fought as one. The operator verified each coordinate. The commander analyzed and selected the target. The driver weaves through the rough terrain to keep the gun alive. High above, the Phoenix circles silently, but not autonomously. A human is at the controls. He or she is constantly observing, intervening when the AI makes a mistake, and giving orders when the time comes. In the command center, experts analyze the massive amounts of data, then send precise instructions to the gunners on the front lines. Technology creates power, but it is people who decide the battle. In Dresba, it was not machines that saved Ukraine. It was the human will, the will to not give up, not to back down, and to make life or death decisions when seconds count. Technology cannot replace courage. No algorithm can replace human judgment. And on that foggy morning, it wasn't just Ukrainian artillery that held the line. It was the Ukrainian people themselves, fighting smarter, faster, and harder than the world had ever imagined. If this story has made you feel empowered, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. That small gesture means more than you think. Meanwhile, at 3:45 a.m. on June 16, 2025, the icy darkness of northern Russia was suddenly torn apart. 30 Tomahawk cruise missiles, each worth more than $2 million, rose from the depths of the sea and soared into the sky. Guided by uninterruptible satellite maps, each missile flies with cold precision, within 3 meters of each other. Before Moscow could understand what was happening, a 100,000-ton, $13 billion American supercarrier had launched a squadron of fighter jets over the Arctic skies. In the air, Growler electronic warfare planes opened the war by drowning all Russian communications frequencies in an eerie silence, an invisible but destructive wave of interference. Next came the Super Hornets, warplanes carrying 36 tons of accurate firepower, which swooped down to destroy the Russian air defense system that had taken decades to build. Not a single American fighter was shot down. Not a single Russian missile hit its target. So how did the United States manage to launch such a perfect global attack without leaving a single trace? And what was the secret tactic that allowed Russia's steel walls to crumble so easily? Stay tuned, you're about to find out. 24 hours before the first strike, on the deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford, the U.S. Navy's $13 billion supercarrier, the atmosphere was tense, but there was no shouting, only quiet urgency. Under the gray skies of the Norwegian Sea, bombs and missiles are loaded onto FA-18 Super Hornet fighters, each worth $70 million. Engineers added HARM anti-radar missiles, 400,000 each, and JDAM guidance kits worth $25,000. In another corner, electronic warfare officers scanned every Russian radar frequency, hunting for the smallest flaw. Every clang of metal, every puff of hydraulic steam carried deadly precision. Beneath the Arctic waves, the USS Florida, a former Trident-class nuclear-powered submarine now refitted for $700 million, moves as silently as a ghost. Inside it are 154 Tomahawk Block 5 missiles, each worth $2 million, turning the ship into a floating arsenal. Sonar crews listened silently for the faintest sound from Russian patrols. In the dimly lit control room, sailors worked in front of a green screen, where the slightest mistake could ruin an entire operation. But the real punch was not in power, but in deception. Hundreds of miles to the southwest, the aircraft carrier USS Dwight D. Eisenhower and its escorts were conducting a highly publicized exercise. SPY radars were scanning vast arcs. Patrol fighters were flying fixed loops. Communications channels were open. To the Russian satellites and electronic eyes, all was shouting, "This is where to watch." Meanwhile, the USS Ford and USS Florida were completely radio silent. Even the Ford's billion-dollar radar was in off-air mode. The $200 million E-2-D Hawkeye Command aircraft flew silently overhead, not emitting signals, silently mapping Russian air defenses. On the deck, the Growlers sat, engines blazing, ready to blind the S-400 radar at the slightest command. USS Florida slowed to below 5 knots to hide the heat from the reactor. Missile launchers were ready. Each Tomahawk was programmed to fly low, following the terrain like a falcon hunting for prey. On deck, officers used paper maps and wax pencils to plan, because in modern warfare, the simplest things are often the most unhackable. While Eisenhower continued to make noise, Russian radars were still trained on the Baltic, and by the time Moscow realized the sledgehammer was indeed quietly forming off the coast of Norway, it was too late. This was no mere attack. This was the Cold War reborn, with a 21st century steel claw, a war of darkness and silence, measured by the calmness of American sailors carrying the strategic legacy of generations.